Carnegie, the father of communication, he once stated a very interesting quote. And his quote was, "There are 3 speeches that you will give throughout your life. The first one is the one you practiced. The second is the one that you actually gave. And the third is the one that you wish you gave." So today for my icebreaker, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the 3 speeches that I gave in my life. I remember a long time ago, and I'll never forget, my very first speech. I was 8 years old, and I was living in Chicago going to a Catholic school. And Sister Mary told us that we had to recite the Apostles' Creed. And she would say, "You have to recite the Apostles' Creed. If you do not recite the Apostles' Creed and you do not do it properly, you will not have your communion." And coming from a Spanish Catholic family, that's as bad as saying that if you don't have your communion, you're going to live a life of sin and you're probably going to go to hell. So therefore, you could imagine how much pressure and nerves a little 8-year-old girl would have, having to go up in front of her peers and recite the Apostles' Creed. So that day in class, Sister Mary called upon me and said, "Miss Suarez, please stand up to the front and recite your Apostles' Creed." So I remember getting up. I was too afraid to even look at my classmates. So I would look down, shaking my hands, trembling, sweat dripping down the sides of my face. And I began. "I believe in one Father, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. To all is seen and unseen." And I did it. I actually pulled it off. I was able to have my communion, and my parents were proud because I wasn't going to go to hell and probably die in sin. And I pulled it off. And that was because I practiced, and I recited it every day. My second speech that I could remember very fondly was years later, when I was 24 years old. It was a couple years after college, and I've always been a little bit of an entrepreneur, kind of daring, kind of a go-getter. And I created my own business. I started my own business. It was a company, it was a talent agency in Chicago, where I represented over 150 Latino and Hispanic actors and models. And I had to create an event, my very first event. And the event was called the Latino Theater Showcase. And this was where we were able to showcase all of our actors and models and all the talent and have them show their artistic gifts. Now at that time, it was interesting because it was during the time where the Latinos like Jennifer Lopez, Ricky Martin, who still was in the closet, was there discussing how Latinos are becoming more powerful and uprising in the arts and to be respected in the industry. So it was a really good time that I started this agency because it was one of the first agencies in Chicago. So I remember at the end of the showcase, I had to go up in front of an audience of over 300 people. And this young 24-year-old in a white gala gown with a podium on the stage. And I remember taking a peek and saying, "Oh my God, there's 300 people, I'm gonna die. I'm not gonna make it, I'm not gonna make it." So I walked up onto that stage. Again, that 8-year-old girl came back, hands trembling, sweat dripping down the side of my face. And I held onto the podium with dear life because I thought I was going to die. And I thought, how am I going to pull this off? How am I going to be able to present? Because there was a small section of it that was actually televised on Telemundo. I don't know if you're familiar with Telemundo. Cameras, lights, and I'm there. And I said, "All right, Corinne, you can do this. The only way you can do this is by focusing on one person in the audience. I don't know who that person is, a random person, but somebody who you believe that that person is going to be your friend. That that person is just somebody that you know, and you're telling them a little bit about your agency, about the talent here today, and this event. Focus on that as if they're your friend." So I found in the third row a guy with a shiny, bald head. And it was almost like, you know, a bow and arrow. You see the target right there, so you just kind of focus on the bald head. I mean, that's what you got. So I focused on his bald head, and that's who I looked at the entire speech. And I stood there, and the first minute, yes, I wanted to die, and it was terrible. But after that first minute, all of a sudden, I felt like I was Evita Perón in Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. I mean, it was like my fellow Argentinos, you know. That's how I felt. It was amazing. It was great. And my last and final speech that I could say that really marked my life was just recently. And this was an unfortunate event. It was at the funeral of my father. And it was a speech that was very difficult to give because it was a compassionate speech. I would have to give a speech in front of all my family, friends, and my father's loved ones. And I would have to talk about a man who was 93 years old. And how do you sum up 93 years in 5 minutes? A man who had tons of history, a man who had so many travels, so many adventures, and so many stories to tell. And the key to this was being able to speak the words, not from my mouth, but from my heart. And I think that's the most important speeches that you're going to do in your life, are the ones that you speak with passion, the ones that you speak from your heart. And those are the speeches that people remember. And I know somewhere up there, my dad is thinking, his little girl did a good job. She did a really good job that day. So in the words of Dale Carnegie, the 3 speeches in your life, those were my 3 speeches, the ones that defined me. And I know and I hope that I'll have a lot more to come. Thank you.